My name is Xuán, and what I'm about to share with you changed my life forever. On December 12th, 2024, I didn't just have a brush with death, I actually died for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. During that time, Jesus Christ himself revealed to me shocking truths about the afterlife that I was commanded to share with the world. What I learned will shake you to your core. The night my near-death experience happened was silent, save for the faint rustle of the wind through the monastery's bamboo trees. My body lay still on the mat, the pain that had gripped me for weeks suddenly gone. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was weightless, free from the prison of my failing body. I opened my eyes, or perhaps I didn't. What I saw was not the wooden beams of my room, but a vast, glowing expanse. The light was soft, golden, and warm, as though I were standing in the embrace of the morning sun. Around me, the faint hum of chanting filled the air. The words were indistinct but familiar, like echoes of the sutras I had recited countless times. "Is this Wutai Mountain?" I thought, my heart swelling with relief. The peace I had long sought seemed to envelop me. Every worry, every fear dissolved as I drifted through this serene realm. The light stretched endlessly, inviting me further in. As I moved, the chants grew louder, almost deafening. But something was changing. The golden light began to flicker, like the wavering flame of a candle in the wind. A faint shadow danced at the edges of my vision. The peace that had cradled me moments ago began to slip through my fingers. The chanting warped, becoming sharp and discordant. The warm light dimmed, replaced by a cold, pale glow. I stopped moving, my heart pounding. "What is this?" I whispered, though no sound escaped my lips. Suddenly, the flickering light vanished and the serene realm crumbled around me. I was falling, weightless and helpless, into an endless void. The warmth was gone, replaced by an icy stillness that gnawed at my soul. My breath caught, though I was no longer sure if I was breathing at all. This was not Wutai Mountain. This was something else entirely. The fall stopped as abruptly as it began, and I found myself suspended in darkness. It was not the darkness of a peaceful night, but an all-consuming void, suffocating and alive. The air was heavy, thick with a stench I couldn't place. My chest ached as if the weight of the entire world pressed down on me. And then I heard it, the screams. They came from every direction, piercing and unrelenting, rising like waves crashing against the walls of this abyss. Men, women, even children, they were all crying out, their voices twisted with agony and despair. My body trembled, though I could not see it. I looked around, but there was no light, no escape. As my eyes adjusted to the void, faint shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Shadows writhed and twisted. Their forms vaguely human but grotesque, stretched and distorted as though they no longer belonged to the natural world. Then I saw them, faces I knew. Monks I had meditated alongside, disciples who had studied under me, people I had believed to be enlightened. They were here, their expressions frozen in torment, their bodies consumed by shadow. One by one, their eyes turned to me, their cries growing louder. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "This can't be real." They achieved enlightenment. They found peace. My voice was weak, swallowed by the void. Suddenly, a force gripped me, binding me in place. I could not move, could not even blink. My body felt cold, heavy, as though chains were wrapping themselves around my very soul. The shadows crept closer, their forms undulating like smoke, and I felt their cold breath on my skin. This is a test. I tried to reassure myself, but the fear clawed at my heart. No teaching, no mantra could steady me now. The despair around me seeped into my core, pulling me deeper into the darkness. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone, utterly forsaken. And as I sank further into the void, a single question echoed in my mind. Why am I here? The screams around me grew louder, deafening, until I thought my mind would shatter. My body was frozen, locked in place by invisible chains that seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. I opened my mouth to cry out, but no sound came. I was utterly powerless, trapped in this void of despair. Then, cutting through the chaos, I heard it, a voice, deep, resonant, and ancient. It spoke as if from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Who is your savior?" The word sent a chill through me, sharp and unrelenting. My breath caught in my chest, and I struggled to comprehend what I had just heard. "Savior," I whispered weakly, my voice trembling. The concept felt foreign, alien to the teachings I had devoted my life to. In Buddhism, there is no savior, only the self, the path, and karma. "I do not need a savior," I said, though my words felt hollow. "I have my karma, my actions, my deeds, they will guide me." The voice came again, louder this time, shaking the very fabric of the void. "Your karma cannot save you." A wave of fear surged through me. I clung desperately to my beliefs, repeating mantras under my breath, but they offered no comfort, no escape. The voice persisted, cutting through my thoughts like a blade. "Who is your savior?" it demanded again. I began to weep, not out of sorrow but out of confusion and terror. My mind raced through years of teachings, searching for an answer, for something to hold on to. But for the first time in my life, my faith felt insufficient, incomplete. The truths I had trusted seemed to slip through my fingers, leaving me with nothing but emptiness. "Why are you asking me this?" I cried out, my voice breaking. The void around me seemed to close in, the darkness pressing against my skin. Doubt crept into my heart, deeper and more insidious than I had ever known. And as the voice repeated its question, I realized I had no answer. The void around me shifted, the darkness peeling back like smoke. In its place, vivid scenes began to unfold before my eyes, as though a great curtain had been drawn aside. At first, I saw myself as I had always been, a monk seated in meditation, my face calm and serene. But as I watched, the image began to warp. The tranquility in my expression faded, replaced by something else, pride. I saw moments where I had judged others, moments where I had clung to my status as a teacher, believing myself above those who sought my guidance. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "That isn't me." But the visions continued relentless. I saw disciples bowing before me, their eyes filled with reverence, and I saw how I had relished their devotion. I saw acts of charity I had performed, not out of compassion, but out of a desire to be seen as virtuous. Each scene struck me like a blow, forcing me to confront truths I had long buried. Then the ground beneath me shifted, and I was plunged into another scene. I stood in a desolate wasteland, the air thick with ash and the stench of decay. All around me were figures writhing in agony, their bodies contorted as though consumed by an unseen fire. My breath caught as I recognized some of the faces. They were monks I had known, men and women I had believed to be enlightened. They reached out to me, their eyes hollow and pleading, but I could do nothing. And then I saw it. Far in the distance, radiant figure chained to a throne. The figure glowed with a light that seemed out of place in this hellish landscape, but the light was dim, as though suppressed by the heavy chains that bound him. I took a step closer, my heart pounding. There was something achingly familiar about the figure, something that filled me with both sorrow and longing. I could not see his face clearly, but his presence was overwhelming. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The figure raised his head, and though his face remained obscured, I felt his gaze pierce through me. A wave of emotion surged within me, grief, shame, and a desperate yearning for something I could not name. The vision faded, and I was left once again in darkness, the weight of what I had seen pressing down on me. My knees buckled, and I fell to the ground, tears streaming down my face. For the first time, I wondered if everything I had believed, everything I had trusted had been wrong. The darkness was absolute. I lay on the cold, unseen ground, unable to move, consumed by despair. The weight of the visions I had witnessed pressed heavily on my chest, suffocating me. The cries of the tormented filled the void, their voices echoing endlessly. I had never felt so hopeless, so completely lost. But then, Out of the suffocating blackness came a light. It was small at first, a faint glimmer in the distance. Slowly, it grew brighter, piercing through the void with an intensity that made me shield my eyes. The cries around me faded into silence, replaced by a profound stillness. As I blinked through the light, I saw a figure emerging, walking toward me. He was clothed in radiant white, the light emanating from him like the sun breaking through storm clouds. His presence was unlike anything I had ever felt, overwhelming yet gentle, powerful yet comforting. The figure stopped before me and extended his hand. "Come to me," he said, his voice resonating deeply within me. "And I will give you rest?" I froze, staring at him in disbelief. The love and compassion in his eyes were undeniable, but so was my shame. I am not worthy," I stammered, lowering my gaze. "I have failed. I have clung to pride, to doubt. I do not deserve your mercy." He knelt before me, his gaze unwavering. "Your suffering is not what defines you," he said softly. "Salvation does not come from what you have done, but from what I have done for you. It is not earned by works, but given by grace." Tears poured down my face, my heart breaking under the weight of his words. In that moment, I understood. All my life, I had tried to carry the burden of my own salvation, relying on karma, effort, and deeds. But now, for the first time, I realized that salvation was a gift, not something to be earned. I hesitated no longer. Reaching out, I took his hand. The moment my hand touched his, the chains that bound me shattered. They fell away, dissolving into nothingness. The weight that had pressed so heavily on my soul lifted, and I felt light, freer than I had ever been. The darkness around me began to retreat, replaced by a warm, golden glow. The screams that had haunted me were gone, replaced by a sound so beautiful it brought fresh tears to my eyes. A chorus of voices singing in harmony, their melody filled with joy and peace. Jesus pulled me to my feet and smiled. "Come," he said, leading me forward. Before us, a new vision unfolded. I saw a realm unlike anything I had ever imagined. The light here was alive, pulsing with warmth and love. Rolling fields of vibrant green stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with trees that bore fruit unlike anything on earth. A river of crystal-clear water flowed through the landscape, its surface sparkling like diamonds. "This," Jesus said, gesturing to the scene, "is the place I have prepared for those who believe. A place where there is no pain, no sorrow, no death, only life, everlasting and abundant." I fell to my knees, overcome with emotion. The peace I felt in this moment was greater than anything I had ever experienced, far beyond what I had sought in my years of meditation and prayer. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Thank you for finding me." Jesus placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your journey is not over," he said. "You have been given a second chance. Go back and share what you have seen. Let others know that they, too, are loved and forgiven." His words echoed in my mind as the vision began to fade. The golden light grew brighter, enveloping everything around me until I could no longer see or hear. And then, with a sudden gasp, I opened my eyes. I was back in my hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses. Their faces were a mixture of shock and relief. "He's awake," one of them exclaimed. "He's breathing." I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs. Tears streamed down my face, but they were not tears of fear or sorrow. They were tears of joy. I was alive. One of the doctors leaned over me, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're a miracle," he said. "We thought we'd lost you." I smiled faintly, my heart full. "No," I said softly. "I was found." The days following my return to life were a blur. My body felt weak, my voice faint. But my mind was consumed by a single thought. What had I seen? I had dedicated my life to understanding the nature of existence, yet everything I had trusted now felt incomplete, fractured. I sat alone in my hospital room, gazing out the window at the sunrise. The golden light that stretched across the horizon reminded me of the light I had seen in the void. the light that had saved me. Jesus, his name echoed in my heart, stirring something deep within me. For so long, I had sought peace through my own efforts, through the teachings of karma and meditation. Yet, in my darkest moment, it was his hand that lifted me. A nurse entered the room one morning, bringing with her a small book. "I thought you might want this," she said with a warm smile, placing the Bible on my bedside table. I stared at it for a long time after she left, hesitant to touch it. I had always viewed the Bible as foreign, unrelated to my journey, yet now it felt as if it were waiting for me. With trembling hands, I opened it and began to read. The words felt alive, resonating in ways I could not explain. When I came to the verse, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest," tears filled my eyes. These were the words I had heard in the void, spoken by the very figure who had saved me. Over the weeks, I immersed myself in the Bible, reading every chance I had. Questions I had never dared to ask now burned within me. What is grace? What is salvation? Who is Jesus truly? With every passage, I found answers that filled the void in my heart, truths that I had not known I was searching for. But as my faith grew, so did my fear. What would my fellow monks say? How could I explain this to my community? They had looked to me as a teacher, a guide, and now I had returned with a story that would challenge everything they believed. Yet, deep within, I felt an unshakable conviction. I had been given this second chance for a reason, and I could not remain silent. The monastery hall was quiet as I stood before the gathered monks and disciples. My hands trembled as I held the Bible close to my chest, but I took a deep breath and steadied myself. This was the moment I had been dreading and preparing for. "I have returned to you not just as your teacher," I began, my voice firm but heavy with emotion, "but as someone who has been shown a truth I never expected." The room stirred, murmurs rippling through the crowd. I shared my story, recounting the moment my spirit left my body, the light I had followed, and the darkness that consumed me. I spoke of the voice in the void that asked me, "Who is your Savior?" and of the figure of Jesus Christ who had reached out his hand and saved me. Faces around the room shifted from curiosity to disbelief to shock. Some monks whispered to one another, others stared at me with wide eyes. I saw the pain in their faces, the same pain I had felt when my beliefs were first challenged. "I know this is difficult to hear," I said, my voice cracking. "I know you may question my words, even my integrity, but I can no longer deny what I have seen, what I have experienced. Salvation is not something we earn through karma or effort. It is a gift freely given through Jesus Christ." The room erupted in voices, some angry, others pleading for me to stop. My closest disciples looked at me as though I had betrayed them, their faces filled with a mix of sorrow and betrayal. Yet, amidst the chaos, I felt a deep peace, the same peace I had felt when Jesus lifted me from the darkness. The fallout was swift. I was asked to leave the monastery. Many of my closest companions turned their backs on me, unable to reconcile my words with their faith. My family, too, struggled to understand, their disappointment cutting deep. Yet, for all I had lost, I gained something far greater. A few weeks later, I stood before a small congregation at a local church wearing a simple white robe. The pastor spoke gently as he prepared to baptize me, his words filled with joy and encouragement. As the water poured over my head, I felt a weight lift from my soul, as though all the chains that had bound me had finally been washed away. From that day forward, I dedicated my life to sharing the gospel, to telling others of the grace that had saved me. Though the path was not easy, I walked it with a peace and purpose I had never known. I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at faith, and for that, I would forever be grateful. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even more insane.